On my 78th birthday, I woke up with my eyebrows and hair shaved off. When I confronted my family, my daughter-in-law said, "It's just a joke. Have a sense of humor." But how did I not notice during the night? What I discovered froze me solid. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Yvonne, and at 78 years old, I thought I had experienced every kind of pain life could offer. I was wrong. I woke up on what should have been the most beautiful day of the year, my 78th birthday, and the first thing I felt was the strange coolness against my scalp. My hand moved instinctively to my hair, that silver crown I had worn proudly for decades, only to find nothing. Smooth skin where my hair should have been. The panic was immediate and overwhelming. I stumbled to the bathroom mirror, and what I saw there will haunt me forever. Not only was every strand of hair gone from my head, but my eyebrows had been completely shaved off too. I looked like a stranger, like someone recovering from chemotherapy, vulnerable and exposed in a way that made my chest tighten with pure terror. My hands shook as I touched my bare scalp. How had this happened? When had this happened? I was a light sleeper, always had been. Even the slightest sound would wake me. How could someone have done this without me stirring? The questions tumbled through my mind as I stared at my reflection, this alien version of myself. "Sterling!" I called out, my voice cracking with emotion. "Sterling, come here right now." My son appeared in the doorway within minutes, still in his pajamas. But the expression on his face wasn't one of shock or concern. It was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like guilt? "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, but his tone was flat, rehearsed. I turned to face him, my hands still pressed against my bare head. "What's wrong? Look at me, Sterling. Someone shaved off all my hair while I was sleeping. All of it." He stood there for a moment and I watched his face carefully. There was no surprise, no outrage on my behalf. Instead, he sighed heavily and rubbed his forehead. "Oh, that. Astrid told me about the prank." Prank. The word hit me like a physical blow. "Prank?" I whispered, feeling my legs grow weak. "This is what you call a prank?" That's when Astrid appeared behind him, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning light. She was already dressed for the day in an expensive outfit I was sure I had paid for, and she had that smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Good morning, Yvonne," she said sweetly, as if nothing had happened. "Happy birthday. I hope you're not too upset about our little joke. I thought it would be funny to give you a new look for your special day." I stared at her, this woman who had married my son 5 years ago, and slowly but surely wormed her way into every aspect of our family life. "You did this to me?" "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she laughed, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "It's just hair. It'll grow back. You should have seen your face. It was hilarious." The cruelty in her voice was like ice water in my veins. This wasn't about humor. This was about power, about humiliation, about making me feel small and helpless on what should have been my day of celebration. "Astrid," Sterling said weakly, "maybe you went a little too far." She shot him a look that silenced him immediately. I had seen that look before, the way she controlled him with just a glance, the way he folded under her influence like paper in the rain. "Too far?" she repeated, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "It's just a harmless prank between family. Honestly, Yvonne, you need to develop a sense of humor. Life's too short to get upset over something so trivial. Trivial. My dignity, my appearance, my sense of self, all trivial to her. Besides," she continued, her tone becoming almost concerned, "I think we should probably cancel the birthday party tonight. I mean, you can't possibly want people to see you like this. It would be so embarrassing for everyone involved." And there it was. The real purpose behind this prank became crystal clear. Cancel the party. Keep people away. But why? I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I watched her face. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was calculated, planned. The party tonight was supposed to be special. I had invited 35 people, including my financial advisor, my lawyer, and several old friends I hadn't seen in months. It was going to be elegant, meaningful, a celebration of a life well lived. Cancel the party? I repeated slowly. Well, yes, Astrid said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I mean, look at yourself. You can't seriously want people to see you like this. It would be mortifying. For all of us. Sterling nodded along like a puppet. Mom, maybe Astrid's right. We could postpone it until your hair grows back a little. Maybe next month? Next month. Always next month with them. Always later. Always when it was convenient for them. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and saw a stranger. When had he become so weak? When had he stopped being my protector and started being her accomplice? I need some time to think, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Astrid clapped her hands together as if I had agreed to something wonderful. Excellent! I'll start calling people to let them know the party's off. Don't worry about anything, Yvonne. I'll handle all the arrangements. The eagerness in her voice was unmistakable. She wanted to make those calls. She wanted to cancel everything. But why was she so desperate to keep people away from me tonight? As they left my bedroom, chattering between themselves about damage control and saving face, I sank down onto my bed and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror across the room. The woman looking back at me was unrecognizable, not just because of the missing hair, but because of the defeat in her eyes. But as I sat there in the growing morning light, something began to shift inside me. The shock was fading, replaced by something harder, more focused. This wasn't just about hair. This wasn't just about a canceled party. This was about something much bigger, much more sinister. The way Astrid had been so quick to suggest canceling the party. The way Sterling had immediately agreed. The way neither of them seemed surprised by what had happened to me. It all felt rehearsed, planned. And if it was planned, then there was a reason behind it. A reason important enough to humiliate a 78-year-old woman on her birthday. I stood up slowly, my reflection straightening with me. Whatever was happening here, whatever game Astrid was playing, I was going to find out. I had lived too long and survived too much to let a manipulative woman destroy me now. The hunt for the truth was about to begin. The house felt different after they left to run errands, though I suspected they were really going somewhere to celebrate their cruel success. I waited until I heard Sterling's car pull out of the driveway before I began my investigation. My first stop was my own bedroom. If someone had shaved off all my hair while I slept, there had to be evidence. I got down on my hands and knees, something I hadn't done in years, and searched every inch of the carpet around my bed. Nothing. Not a single strand of my silver hair anywhere. That was impossible. When you shave off that much hair, it goes somewhere. It doesn't just disappear into thin air. Someone had cleaned up meticulously, which meant this wasn't a spontaneous prank. It was premeditated. I moved to the guest bathroom next, the one Astrid used when she stayed overnight. Sterling had moved back in with me 6 months ago after he lost his job, and Astrid had been practically living here ever since. She claimed it was to help take care of me, but I was beginning to suspect her motives were far less noble. In the guest bathroom, I found what I was looking for. Tucked behind the toilet, as if someone had tried to clean up but missed a spot, were several long strands of silver hair. My hair. The evidence that this violation had taken place in Astrid's space, with Astrid's tools. My hands trembled as I picked up the strands. The reality of what had happened was sinking in deeper now. She had drugged me. She must have. And then spent time carefully, methodically removing every bit of hair from my head and face. The level of cruelty required for such an act was breathtaking, but I needed more proof. I needed to understand how she had managed to keep me unconscious during such an invasive procedure. I made my way to the kitchen, moving slowly but with purpose. Astrid was always offering to make me tea before bed, always insisting on preparing my medications, always being so helpful and caring in front of Sterling. Last night had been no different. I opened every cabinet, examined every bottle, every container. In the back of the spice cabinet, behind the rarely used nutmeg and cardamom, I found it. A small brown bottle with a pharmacy label that made my blood run cold. Diphenhydramine, 50 milligrams. The label showed it had been prescribed to Astrid 3 weeks ago for sleep aid. But the bottle was nearly empty, and if she was taking it for her own sleep, why was it hidden in my kitchen? I knew what diphenhydramine was. At high doses, it could cause deep sedation, especially in elderly people like me. The kind of sedation that would keep someone unconscious while their hair was being shaved off. My legs gave out, and I had to grab the counter to keep from falling. The magnitude of what Astrid had done was overwhelming. This wasn't just a prank. This was assault. She had drugged me and then physically violated me while I was unconscious. The phone rang, startling me out of my shock. I answered without checking the caller ID. Yvonne? It's Margaret from the country club. Margaret Hartwell had been my friend for over 20 years. I just got the strangest call from your daughter-in-law. She said you're canceling tonight's party because you're feeling unwell. I closed my eyes, feeling the anger build in my chest. She said I was unwell? Yes, something about a sudden illness. But you sounded fine when we spoke yesterday. Are you all right, dear? So Astrid was already making her calls, already spinning her lies, but she hadn't told Margaret the truth about what she'd done to me. Interesting. Margaret, I said carefully, what exactly did Astrid tell you? Just that you had come down with something contagious and wouldn't be able to host the party. She sounded very concerned, said she was worried about your health. Should I send flowers? Contagious. Not embarrassing. Not humiliating. Contagious. She was telling different stories to different people, controlling the narrative in whatever way served her best. No flowers necessary, I said slowly. I'm going to call you back later, Margaret. There are some things I need to figure out first. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the pill bottle in my hands. Everything was becoming clearer now. Astrid had drugged me, shaved off my hair, and was now using my supposed embarrassment to cancel a party she desperately didn't want to happen. But why? What was so important about keeping people away from me tonight? I thought about the guest list. My financial advisor, Robert Chen, was coming. He handled all my investments and had been asking to meet with me about some irregularities he'd noticed in my accounts. My lawyer, Patricia Wells, was also invited. She had been helping me update my will recently. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was an ugly one. I decided to check something else. My purse, where I kept my checkbook and credit cards, was sitting on the kitchen counter where I always left it. I opened it with shaking fingers and immediately noticed something wrong. My checks weren't in the right order. Someone had been going through them. I flipped to the register where I recorded all my transactions. The last entry I remembered making was a $50 check to the church last Sunday. But there were 3 more entries after that, all in handwriting that looked like mine but felt wrong somehow. $200 to household expenses, $350 to medical supplies, $125 to miscellaneous, all dated within the last week, all in handwriting that was close to mine, but not quite right. My heart was pounding now. I grabbed my purse and headed to my bedroom, to the small desk where I kept all my important papers. I needed to see my bank statements, needed to understand how deep this went, but when I opened the desk drawer, half of my statements were missing. The most recent ones, the ones that would show any unauthorized transactions, were gone. I heard a car door slam outside and rushed to the window. Sterling and Astrid were back, carrying shopping bags and laughing about something. They looked so normal, so innocent, but I now knew better. I quickly hid the pill bottle in my pocket and tried to compose myself. When they came through the front door, I was sitting in my living room chair, trying to look like the defeated old woman they expected to see. "How are you feeling, Mom?" Sterling asked, though he barely looked at me. "Still pretty upset," I said truthfully. "Astrid, I've been thinking about what you said, about canceling the party." Her eyes lit up with interest. "And? Maybe you're right. Maybe it would be too embarrassing. But I was wondering, have you already called everyone?" "Oh yes," she said quickly. "I've been very busy. Called every single person on your list. They all understand completely. Very sympathetic about your condition." My condition, not my appearance, not what had been done to me. My condition, as if I were sick. That was very thoughtful of you, I said, watching her face carefully. I'm sure that was a lot of work. She smiled that cold smile again. Anything for family, Yvonne. I just want what's best for you. As she spoke, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Caught in the expensive bracelet on her wrist was a single strand of silver hair. My hair. She was still carrying evidence of what she'd done to me, wearing it like a trophy. I excused myself and went to my bedroom, my mind racing. Astrid thought she had won. She thought she had successfully humiliated me, drugged me, stolen from me, and canceled my birthday party. She thought I was a weak old woman who would simply accept whatever she dished out. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But first, I needed to know exactly how much money she had stolen, and I needed to figure out why she was so desperate to keep my financial advisor and lawyer away from me tonight. The real investigation was just beginning, and something told me that what I'd discovered so far was only the tip of the iceberg. That afternoon, while Astrid and Sterling were out shopping for what Astrid called supplies for your recovery, I knew I had to find the truth. The strand of my hair caught in her bracelet haunted me, but it was just one piece of a larger, more sinister puzzle. I decided to start with something practical, finding a wig for tonight. Because despite what they thought, despite their manipulation and cruelty, I was not going to let them cancel my birthday party. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting against. The local beauty supply store was a 20-minute drive, and I wrapped a silk scarf around my head before leaving. The young woman behind the counter was kind enough not to stare, and she helped me find a wig that closely matched my natural silver color. As she adjusted it on my head, I caught my reflection in the mirror and felt some of my strength returning. You look beautiful, she said gently. Is this for a special occasion? My birthday party, I told her, and saying it out loud made it feel more real, more possible. On the drive home, I stopped at the bank. I had been putting off looking at my accounts online. I preferred paper statements and in-person visits. But something told me I needed to see my recent transaction history immediately. Sarah Mitchell, the bank manager who had handled my accounts for over 10 years, greeted me with concern when she saw the scarf covering my head. Mrs. Henderson, are you feeling well? You look a bit pale. I'm fine, Sarah. I just need to review my recent account activity, all of it, going back 6 months. She led me to her office and pulled up my accounts on her computer. What I saw there made my hands shake so violently I had to grip the arms of my chair. In the past 6 months, there had been dozens of withdrawals I didn't remember making. Cash withdrawals of $200, $300, sometimes as much as $500. Always in amounts small enough not to trigger any automatic alerts, but large enough to add up to something significant. Sarah, I said quietly, I need you to add up all these cash withdrawals from the past 6 months. Her fingers flew over the calculator. That comes to $8,400, Mrs. Henderson. $8,400. Nearly $10,000 of my money, gone in small increments over 6 months. The same 6 months that Astrid had been helping me manage my daily affairs. Sarah, I need copies of all the withdrawal slips. Every single one. She printed them out, and as I examined each slip, my heart sank further. The signatures looked like mine, but I could see the subtle differences now that I was looking for them. The way she crossed her T's was slightly different from mine. The way she dotted her I's was too deliberate. But it was more than just forged signatures. There were also legitimate checks that I had signed, but for amounts that had been altered. A check I wrote for $15 to the pharmacy had been changed to $150. A $25 check to the gardener had become $250. The scope of the theft was breathtaking. But even more chilling was how systematic it had been. Astrid hadn't just stolen impulsively. She had been planning this for months, carefully learning to forge my signature, gradually increasing the amounts as she became more confident. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah said gently, these irregularities are very concerning. Have you given anyone else access to your accounts? I thought about all the times Astrid had offered to help me with my banking, All the times she had volunteered to run errands for me. All the times she had been so helpful and caring. She had been studying me, learning my habits, perfecting her forgery skills. Yes, I said finally, I think I have. Sarah's expression grew serious. Mrs. Henderson, I think you should contact the police. This appears to be a case of elder financial abuse. Elder financial abuse. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's what I was, an elderly victim of someone I had trusted, someone I had welcomed into my family. How much money do I have left in my accounts? I asked, dreading the answer. Sarah's fingers moved over the keyboard again. Your savings account shows a balance of $12,300. Your checking account has $867. I felt dizzy. 6 months ago, I had had over $30,000 in savings. My pension and Social Security provided a comfortable income, and I had been careful with money my entire life. Now, thanks to Astrid's systematic theft, I was down to less than half of what I should have had. There's something else, Sarah said hesitantly. 3 weeks ago, someone came in asking about procedures for changing beneficiaries on your accounts. They claimed to be your daughter-in-law and said you were having memory problems. My blood turned to ice. Did you give them any information? No, of course not. We told them that only you could make changes to your own accounts. But Mrs. Henderson, they seemed very familiar with your account details. They knew your balance, your recent transaction history, more than they should have known. Astrid had been planning something even bigger than theft. She had been preparing to take over my accounts completely. And the hair shaving, the canceled party, it was all part of a larger plan to make me seem incompetent, unreliable, possibly suffering from dementia. I left the bank with copies of all the fraudulent transactions and a sick feeling in my stomach. But I also left with something else, a burning determination to stop her before she could finish whatever she was planning. When I got home, the house was still empty. I went straight to Sterling's old room, where Astrid had been keeping her things. I had never searched through her belongings before. It had seemed like a violation of privacy. Now I realized that she had been violating me for months. In her dresser drawer, underneath her expensive lingerie that I was sure I had paid for, I found a manila folder. Inside were photocopies of all my bank statements, going back a full year. Notes in her handwriting about my daily routines, my habits, my schedule, lists of my assets, my house, my car, my jewelry, everything I owned. But the most chilling thing was a handwritten timeline. It showed her plan, month by month, for gaining control of my finances. The hair shaving was labeled as crisis event, demonstrate incompetence. The canceled party was noted as avoid financial advisor meeting. I'm my financial advisor. Robert Chen had been wanting to meet with me about irregularities in my accounts. Astrid knew he would be at the party tonight, knew he would ask questions she couldn't answer. So she had created a crisis to keep him away. At the bottom of the folder was a draft letter to my doctor, asking for a mental competency evaluation. Astrid had written it as if it came from Sterling, expressing concern about my declining mental state and erratic behavior. She was planning to have me declared incompetent so she could take control of everything. The final document in the folder made my blood run cold. It was a power of attorney form, already filled out, giving Astrid complete control over my finances and medical decisions. The only thing missing was my signature. I realized with crystal clarity that tonight's party wasn't just something she wanted to avoid. It was something she had to avoid. Too many people who knew me well would be there. People who could see that I was mentally sharp, financially aware, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. The hair shaving wasn't just cruel humiliation. It was meant to be evidence of my declining mental state. Who in their right mind would shave off their own hair? Clearly, it would seem to others I was having some kind of breakdown, but she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated me. I gathered all the evidence, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the pill bottle, the timeline, everything. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and made a list of phone calls I needed to make. First, I called Robert Chen, my financial advisor. Robert, it's Yvonne Henderson. I know Astrid called to cancel tonight, but I need you to disregard that. The party is still on, and I need to speak with you urgently about some irregularities in my accounts. Mrs. Henderson, your daughter-in-law said you were ill. Are you sure you're up for this? I'm more up for this than I've been for anything in months. Can you come an hour early? I have some documents I need you to see. Next, I called Patricia Wells, my lawyer. Patricia, it's Yvonne. I need you to come to my party tonight, and I need you to bring a witness form. I think I'm going to need to press charges against someone. By the time I finished making my calls, I had reached 12 people who had been told the party was canceled. Every single one of them agreed to come anyway when I explained that there had been a misunderstanding. Astrid thought she had isolated me, humiliated me, stolen from me, and silenced me. She thought she had won. She was about to learn that you don't destroy a 78-year-old woman who has survived everything life could throw at her without a fight. The party was going to happen, and it was going to be a birthday celebration Astrid would never forget. When Astrid and Sterling returned from their shopping trip, I was sitting in my living room chair, the silk scarf still covering my head, looking exactly like the defeated old woman they expected to see. They had no idea that underneath that scarf was a perfectly styled wig, or that in my bedroom was a folder full of evidence that would destroy Astrid's carefully constructed web of lies. "How are you feeling, Yvonne?" Astrid asked, setting down several shopping bags with theatrical concern. "We brought you some nice soup for dinner. I thought you might not have much of an appetite today." The irony wasn't lost on me. She was playing the role of the caring daughter-in-law while literally poisoning my food with sedatives and stealing my money. But I needed to play my part too, at least for a few more hours. "I'm still very upset," I said truthfully, letting my voice shake a little. "I keep touching my head and remembering what happened. It's so humiliating." Sterling shifted uncomfortably in the doorway. "Mom, maybe we should talk to someone about this, like a doctor. This kind of reaction seems a bit extreme." A doctor, of course. That was the next step in their plan. Get me in front of a medical professional while I was supposedly having a breakdown. Get some kind of documentation about my mental state. "Maybe you're right," I said slowly. "I do feel confused about some things lately. Like my bank account. I could have sworn I had more money in savings than what the statement showed last month." I watched Astrid's face carefully as I said this. There was a flicker of something, panic, before she quickly composed herself. "Oh, Yvonne, you know how confusing those bank statements can be. All those numbers and fees. That's why I've been helping you with them, remember? You signed that form giving me access so I could make sure everything was in order." I had never signed any such form, but I nodded as if I remembered. "Yes, you've been so helpful. I don't know what I would do without you." The smile that crossed her face was triumphant, predatory. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted me. Confused, grateful, dependent. "Why don't you rest before dinner?" she suggested. "Sterling and I will take care of everything. You don't need to worry about a thing." I agreed and went to my bedroom, but I didn't rest. Instead, I spent the next 2 hours carefully preparing for the evening ahead. I arranged all the evidence in a manila folder. The bank statements, the forged signatures, the pill bottle, Astrid's handwritten timeline, everything. I hid it in my bedroom closet where I could easily retrieve it during the party. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I got dressed up. Really dressed up. I chose my navy blue silk dress, the one Sterling's father had bought me for our 25th wedding anniversary. I put on my pearl necklace, the one that had belonged to my mother. I applied makeup carefully, paying special attention to drawing in eyebrows where mine used to be. Finally, I put on the wig. It looked so natural that even I was amazed. In the mirror, I saw not a humiliated victim, but a woman preparing for battle. At 6 o'clock, I heard voices in the living room. Astrid was talking to someone in hushed, urgent tones. "She's been acting very strangely all day," I heard her say. "Very paranoid, talking about money being missing, asking odd questions about her bank account. I'm really worried about her mental state." I crept closer to the door to listen. "Maybe we should postpone this," Sterling's voice replied. "If she's having some kind of episode." "No," Astrid said firmly. "We need to handle this now before it gets worse. Dr. Morrison said he could come by tomorrow to evaluate her, but we need to document her behavior tonight." "Dr. Morrison." She already had a doctor lined up to declare me incompetent. The pieces of her plan were falling into place perfectly, except for one thing. She didn't know that I knew. At 6:30, the doorbell rang. I heard Astrid answer it with surprise in her voice. "Robert? What are you doing here? I called this morning to cancel. Mrs. Henderson called me back." Robert Chen's voice was professional but concerned. "She said there had been a misunderstanding and that the party was still happening. She asked me to come early to discuss some account irregularities." I could practically feel Astrid's panic through the walls. "Oh, well, she's been very confused today," Astrid said quickly. "Very disoriented. I don't think she's in any condition to discuss financial matters. Maybe you should come back another time." "I'd prefer to hear that from Mrs. Henderson herself, if you don't mind." That was my cue. I opened my bedroom door and walked into the living room. Robert's eyes widened when he saw me. Not because I looked terrible, but because I looked absolutely nothing like the confused, incompetent woman Astrid had described to him. "Robert," I said warmly, "thank you so much for coming early. I have some documents I'd like you to review." Astrid's face went white. She was staring at me as if she were seeing a ghost. The wig looked so natural. My makeup was so carefully applied. My dress so elegant. I looked like a woman in complete control of her faculties. "Yvonne," she stammered, "you look different." "I decided not to let a bad hair day ruin my birthday," I said calmly. "Robert, shall we go to the kitchen where we can spread out the paperwork?" Over the next 30 minutes, I showed Robert everything. The forged signatures, the altered checks, the unauthorized withdrawals. His expression grew grimmer with each piece of evidence. "Mrs. Henderson, this is clearly a case of financial fraud," he said quietly. "You need to contact the authorities immediately." "I plan to," I replied. "But first, I want to give the person responsible a chance to confess publicly." By 7 o'clock, guests were arriving despite Astrid's attempts to cancel them. Margaret Hartwell came with a beautiful bouquet of roses. Patricia Wells, my lawyer, arrived with her briefcase and a grim expression that told me she understood the seriousness of what I had described to her over the phone. One by one, my friends and family filled my living room and dining room. People I had known for decades, people who knew me well enough to see that there was nothing wrong with my mental state. Astrid moved through the crowd like a trapped animal, her smile becoming more forced with each new arrival. "I don't understand," I heard her whisper to Sterling. "I called everyone. I told them the party was canceled." "Maybe some people didn't get the message?" Sterling suggested weakly, but even he was starting to look suspicious of his wife's behavior. The caterer arrived with the food I had secretly reordered that afternoon. The flowers I had re-delivered were arranged beautifully throughout the house. Everything was exactly as I had originally planned, except for one crucial difference. Tonight wasn't just a birthday party. Tonight was going to be a reckoning. At 8 o'clock, when everyone had arrived and been served dinner, I stood up and tapped my wine glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my 78th birthday," I began, my voice strong and clear. "I know some of you received calls today saying the party was canceled, but I wanted you all here tonight because I have something very important to share with all of you." I could see Astrid in my peripheral vision, her face frozen in terror. She knew what was coming, but she was trapped. Leaving now would only make her look more guilty. "This morning, I woke up to discover that someone had shaved off all my hair while I slept," I continued, and gasps rippled through the room. At first, I was told it was just a prank. But as the day went on, I discovered that it was actually part of something much more serious. I reached for the manila folder that Patricia was holding for me. Over the past 6 months, someone has been systematically stealing money from my bank accounts, forging my signature, altering my checks, and withdrawing cash in amounts designed to avoid detection. The total amount stolen is $8,400. The room was completely silent now. Everyone was staring at me with shock and growing understanding. "The hair shaving wasn't a prank," I said, my voice growing stronger. "It was meant to make me look incompetent, unstable. It was part of a plan to have me declared mentally unfit so that someone could take control of my finances completely." I looked directly at Astrid for the first time since beginning my speech. Her face was ashen, her hands trembling. The person who did this to me is in this room right now, I said quietly. And I think it's time for her to explain herself. The silence that followed was deafening. But I wasn't finished yet. The real revelation was still to come. The silence in my living room was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. 35 pairs of eyes turned to follow my gaze as I looked directly at Astrid, who was standing frozen by the dining room entrance, her wine glass trembling in her hand. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, her voice high and strained. "Yvonne, you're clearly having some kind of episode. Everyone can see that you're not yourself tonight. But everyone could see exactly the opposite. I was completely myself, composed, articulate, presenting evidence methodically. It was Astrid who looked like she was falling apart. Let me show everyone exactly what I'm talking about, I said calmly, opening the manila folder. Robert, would you please explain to our guests what you found when you reviewed my bank statements this afternoon? Robert Chen stood up, his expression grave. Mrs. Henderson's accounts show clear evidence of systematic fraud over the past 6 months. Forged signatures, altered check amounts, unauthorized cash withdrawals totaling $8,400. Margaret Hartwell gasped. $8,000? Astrid, how could you? I didn't do anything, Astrid protested, but her voice was shaking now. She's confused. She's been acting strangely all day, talking about money being missing, being paranoid about everything. Tell them, Sterling. All eyes turned to my son, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. For a moment, I thought he might actually defend his wife, might choose her lies over his mother's truth. Sterling, I said quietly, do you remember what you said this morning when you saw what had been done to me? You said Astrid had told you about the prank. That means you knew it was going to happen. Sterling's face went pale. The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. She said it would just be funny, he stammered. She said you needed to loosen up, have a sense of humor. I didn't know about any money. You knew she was going to drug me and shave off my hair, and you said nothing? I asked, my voice cutting through his weak protests. Drug you? Patricia Wells, my lawyer, stood up sharply. Someone drugged you? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the brown pill bottle I had found in my kitchen. Diphenhydramine, 50 milligrams, prescribed to Astrid 3 weeks ago, but hidden in my spice cabinet. Last night, she made me tea before bed, just like she's been doing for months. Except last night, she added something extra. Dr. Harrison, my longtime physician who was among the guests, took the bottle from me and examined it. At Mrs. Henderson's age and weight, this dosage would cause deep sedation for several hours, more than enough time for someone to. He trailed off, looking horrified. More than enough time for someone to shave off all my hair and eyebrows while I was unconscious, I finished, which is exactly what happened. Astrid was backing toward the door now, her face flushed with panic. You can't prove any of this. It's all speculation from a confused old woman. Actually, I can prove it, I said, pulling out another document from the folder. This is a timeline I found in your dresser drawer, Astrid, written in your handwriting. It outlines your plan month by month for gaining control of my finances. I held up the paper so everyone could see it. Here's where it says, Crisis Event. Demonstrate incompetence. That was the hair shaving. And here's where it says, Avoid financial advisor meeting. That's why you tried so hard to cancel tonight's party. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Several people were standing now, moving closer to get a better look at the evidence. But wait, I continued, my voice rising above the noise. There's more. Patricia, would you please read aloud what's written at the bottom of this timeline? Patricia took the paper and read in a clear, strong voice. Phase 3, Mental Competency Evaluation. Dr. Morrison scheduled for evaluation. Power of attorney documents prepared. Full financial control by Christmas. The gasps and angry voices filled the room. I watched as the truth settled over my guests like a dark cloud. This wasn't just theft. This was a calculated plan to completely take over my life. You were planning to have me declared incompetent, I said, looking directly at Astrid. You were going to take control of everything I own. My house, my savings, my pension, everything. She's lying, Astrid screamed, all pretense of composure gone now. She's making this up because she's jealous of me, because Sterling loves me more than her. The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. She was cornered and she knew it. Sterling? I said quietly, never taking my eyes off Astrid. Tell everyone the truth. Did you know about the plan to have me declared incompetent? Sterling was silent for so long I thought he might refuse to answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, She said you were getting forgetful. She said you needed help managing your affairs. She said it would be better for everyone if she just took care of everything. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her, he admitted, tears in his eyes. I wanted to believe that she cared about you, about our family. I didn't want to see what she really was. Astrid's face twisted with rage. What I really am? I'm the one who's been taking care of her when you were too weak to do it yourself. I'm the one who's been managing her money because she's too old and stupid to do it right. The mask was completely off now. The sweet, caring daughter-in-law was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating and cruel. Managing my money? I repeated. Is that what you call stealing $8,400? You have more money than you know what to do with, Astrid shot back. You're going to die soon anyway. What difference does it make who spends it? The room went completely silent again. Even Sterling looked shocked by his wife's words. Margaret Hartwell was the first to speak. How dare you? She said, her voice shaking with anger. How dare you speak to Yvonne that way in her own home, on her birthday, after what you've done to her? What I've done to her? Astrid laughed bitterly. I've been a prisoner in this house for months, taking care of an ungrateful old woman who doesn't appreciate anything I do for her. Do you know what it's like to live with someone who questions every penny you spend, who hoards her money like some kind of miser? I questioned your spending because you were spending my money, I said calmly. Money you stole from me. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, his expression stern. Mrs. Henderson, I think you need to call the police. What's been described here tonight constitutes elder abuse, financial fraud, and assault. Already done, Patricia Wells said, holding up her phone. I called them 20 minutes ago. They should be here any moment. As if summoned by her words, we heard the sound of car doors slamming outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Astrid's face went white. You called the police? You actually called the police on your own daughter-in-law? I called the police on a thief and an abuser, I corrected. The fact that you married my son doesn't give you the right to steal from me, drug me, or humiliate me. The doorbell rang, and Patricia went to answer it. 2 police officers entered, their expressions serious as they took in the scene. A room full of well-dressed elderly people, a woman in an expensive dress who looked like she was about to bolt, and me, standing calmly in the center of it all with a folder full of evidence. Mrs. Henderson? The older officer asked. We received a call about financial fraud and elder abuse. Yes, officer, I said, handing him the folder. I have documentation of systematic theft from my bank accounts, forged signatures, and evidence of being drugged and assaulted while unconscious. As the officer reviewed the documents, Astrid made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. Officers, this woman is clearly suffering from dementia, she said, her voice taking on that syrupy, sweet tone again. She's been confused all day, making wild accusations. I'm her caregiver. I've been trying to help her, but she's become increasingly paranoid and hostile. The officer looked up from the papers, then looked around the room at all the witnesses who had heard Astrid's earlier confession, who had seen her mask slip completely. Ma'am, he said to Astrid, based on the evidence here and the statements of multiple witnesses, I'm placing you under arrest for financial fraud and elder abuse. As the handcuffs clicked around Astrid's wrists, she turned to look at me one last time. The hatred in her eyes was pure and undisguised. You think you've won, she hissed, but you're still just a pathetic old woman who's going to die alone. I looked at her calmly, surrounded by 35 people who cared about me, who had come to celebrate my birthday despite her attempts to isolate me. Alone? I said quietly. Look around, Astrid. I'm not the one leaving here in handcuffs. As they led her away, Sterling started to follow, but I called his name. Sterling, I said, and he turned back to face me. You have a choice to make. You can go with her, or you can stay and try to rebuild the trust you've broken. But if you choose her, don't ever come back. He stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down his face, before slowly sitting back down in his chair. The party was far from over, but the real celebration was just beginning. 3 months have passed since that night, and I'm sitting in my garden watching the sun set over the roses I planted last spring. My hair has grown back to about 1 inch long, silver and soft, and I find I actually like the shorter style. It makes me look younger, more modern, more like the woman I've become. Sterling never left that night. After the police took Astrid away, after the guests finally went home with hugs and promises to call soon, he sat at my kitchen table and cried like he hadn't since he was a little boy. Mom, he said through his tears, I don't know how to apologize for what I let happen to you. I made us both tea, real tea with no additives, and sat across from him. You start by telling me the truth about everything. And he did. He told me how Astrid had slowly convinced him that I was becoming forgetful, how she had suggested that someone needed to keep an eye on my finances for my own good. He told me how she had made him feel guilty for not contributing more to the household, how she had convinced him that taking some money from my accounts was really just an advance on his inheritance. She said you had more money than you could ever spend, he said, his voice hollow. She said it wasn't really stealing if it was going to be mine eventually anyway. The manipulation had been masterful. Astrid had isolated him from me just as effectively as she had tried to isolate me from everyone else. She had made him doubt his own instincts, his own relationship with his mother. But the hair, Sterling, I said quietly. How could you have known about that and said nothing? He was quiet for a long time before answering. She told me you had been talking about wanting a dramatic new look for your birthday. She said you were too embarrassed to go to a salon, that you wanted it to be a surprise. She said if I really loved you, I would support your choices even if they seemed strange. Even then, even in her cruelest act, she had found a way to make it seem like kindness, like she was helping me fulfill some secret wish rather than humiliating me in the most degrading way possible. The legal proceedings moved quickly once the police had all the evidence. Astrid was charged with financial fraud, elder abuse, and assault. The district attorney told me that my case was one of the most well-documented instances of elder financial abuse she had ever seen. Most victims don't have the presence of mind to gather evidence the way you did, she said. Most of them are too confused or ashamed to fight back. Astrid pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would have been humiliating for her and painful for Sterling. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution, not just the $8,400 she had stolen, but also the legal fees, the cost of the investigation, and punitive damages. The final amount came to $15,700. More importantly to me, she was ordered to have no contact with me for 5 years after her release. No phone calls, no letters, no showing up at my door with crocodile tears and false apologies. Sterling and I are rebuilding our relationship slowly. He moved out of my house the week after Astrid's arrest, not because I asked him to, but because he said he needed to prove to both of us that he could be independent, that he could make his own decisions without anyone manipulating him. He got a job at a local hardware store, nothing glamorous but honest work that pays enough for him to rent a small apartment across town. He comes for dinner every Sunday, and we talk about everything. His father, my childhood, his fears about the future, my hopes for the time I have left. I keep waiting for you to tell me you don't forgive me, he said last Sunday as we sat on my back porch after dinner. I forgave you the night it happened, I told him, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. I know, he said quietly. I just want you to know that I see you now. Really see you. Not as someone who needs to be managed or controlled or taken care of, but as my mother. As the strongest person I know. The money has been fully restored to my accounts, plus interest and damages. But more than that, I've taken control of my finances in a way I never had before. I've learned to use online banking. I review all my statements carefully, and I've set up alerts for any unusual activity. No one will ever be able to take advantage of me financially again. I've also made some changes to my will. Sterling is still my primary heir, but now there are safeguards in place. If he remarries, his spouse cannot access any of the inheritance without approval from my lawyer. If there are any signs that he's being manipulated or controlled, the money goes into a trust that he can only access gradually. I'm not doing this to punish you, I explained when I told him about the changes. I'm doing this to protect you. You're vulnerable to people like Astrid, and I won't let someone use you to hurt our family again. He understood. In fact, he seemed relieved. Margaret Hartwell has become an even closer friend since that night. She calls me every few days to check in, and we've started taking trips together, something I never did when I was worried about leaving my house and my finances unguarded. Last month, we went to Savannah for a long weekend. I wore sundresses and wide-brimmed hats to protect my growing hair from the sun, and I felt more carefree than I had in years. We took a carriage tour, ate at fancy restaurants, and stayed up too late drinking wine and laughing about our wild youth. You know what I realized? Margaret said on our last night there. Astrid actually did you a favor. I raised an eyebrow. How do you figure that? She showed you how strong you really are. She tried to break you, and instead you rose up and destroyed her. Most people our age would have just accepted it, would have let someone like that take over their lives. But not you. She was right, in a way. I had always thought of myself as someone who avoided conflict, who preferred peace to confrontation. But when pushed to my absolute limit, I had found reserves of strength and determination I didn't know I possessed. The night of my birthday party had shown me something important. I was not a victim, a thief. I was not a helpless old woman who needed to be managed or protected from the world. I was a force to be reckoned with. Dr. Harrison has given me a clean bill of health, both physically and mentally. Your mind is as sharp as ever, he told me at my last appointment. Sharper, maybe. Sometimes trauma can actually improve cognitive function in people your age. It forces the brain to work harder, to stay more alert. I've been more socially active than I've been in years. I've joined a book club, started volunteering at the local literacy center, and even took up watercolor painting. My house is full of flowers and light, and I wake up every morning feeling grateful for another day. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about what happened. The truth is, I was angry for a while. Furious, actually. But anger is exhausting when you're 78 years old, and I decided I had better things to do with my energy. What I feel now is something deeper and more lasting than anger. I feel proud. Proud that I trusted my instincts. Proud that I fought back. Proud that I refused to be victimized by someone who thought I was too old and weak to defend myself. Yesterday, I got a letter from a woman named Dorothy who lives 3 states away. She had read about my case in her local newspaper, where it was used as an example of how elder abuse victims can fight back. Your story gave me the courage to report my own son-in-law, she wrote. He had been stealing from me for 2 years, and I was too ashamed to tell anyone. But after reading about what you did, I realized that shame belongs to the person who commits the crime, not the person who stops it. I've gotten 17 letters like that so far. 17 people who found the courage to save themselves because I found the courage to save myself. If nothing else good comes from what happened to me, that would be enough. This morning, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the same mirror where I first discovered what Astrid had done to me. My hair is silver and stylish. My eyebrows have grown back full and strong, and my eyes are clear and determined. I am 78 years old. I have survived a husband's death, a son's weakness, and a predator's cruelty. I have my health, my independence, my friends, and my dignity. I have never been more at peace in my entire life. Tonight, I'm having a small dinner party, just Margaret, Patricia, Robert, and Sterling. We're celebrating not my birthday this time, but something even more important. The fact that sometimes when someone tries to destroy you, they end up making you stronger instead. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And at 78 years old, I'm just getting started. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.